everyone, and welcome back to Lit Talk with Lisa. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Whenever I sit down to record these episodes, I like to imagine that we're just hanging out. Maybe you're listening while driving to work, maybe you've got your headphones on during a walk, or maybe you're curled up with a coffee and just want some inspiration to kickstart your day. Wherever you are, thank you for tuning in and for letting me be a little part of your world. So let me start today with a little story. A few years ago, I met this friend. Let's call him Daniel. He had this dream of starting his own business. He talked about it all the time, how he wanted to open a coffee shop, one of those cozy places where people could come not just for caffeine, but for community. He even had the location picked out in his mind, the kind of beans he wanted to source, the decor, everything. And every time we'd meet, he'd bring it up. But here's the thing. Months passed, then a year, then two. And nothing. No coffee shop. Just the same dream, floating around in his head. And when I asked him why, he'd say things like, well, I'm waiting for the right time. Or I need more money first. Or I don't know if I'm ready. You know the drill. And here's where it gets interesting. Around that same time, I stumbled across Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And as I was reading, I kept thinking of Daniel. Because this book, it's not just about getting rich in the financial sense. It's about what makes some people turn dreams into reality, while others just keep dreaming. And the more I read, the more I thought, wow, if Daniel just knew some of these principles, maybe he'd finally make that coffee shop happen. Now let's be real. Think and Grow Rich was first published back in 1937. Yeah, almost a century ago. And the world was very different then. But the funny thing is, the core ideas, they're still just as powerful today as they were back then. Hill spent over 20 years studying successful people, like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, basically the giants of that era, and he wanted to figure out what made them different. Was it luck? Was it intelligence? Was it just being born into the right family? Or was there something deeper? And according to Hill, there was. He called it the philosophy of achievement. Which sounds kind of grand, right? But when you break it down, it's actually very practical. It's about the habits, the mindset, the inner game that shapes whether you stay stuck in dreaming or whether you actually move into doing. So that's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to start exploring some of those early lessons from Think and Grow Rich, the ones that really lay the foundation for everything else. And I promise, this isn't going to be one of those boring, here are the 10 steps type of talks. No. I want this to feel like we're in conversation. I'll tell you what Hill said, but I'll also share stories, little modern-day examples, things that might click for you in your own life. Because honestly, if there's one thing I've learned from reading this book over and over, it's that it's not meant to stay on the page. It's meant to be lived. All right, so let's get into it. The very first big idea in Think and Grow Rich, and it's so important Hill puts it right up front, is desire. Like a burning desire. And not the casual, oh yeah, it'd be nice if someday maybe I kind of thing. Nope. He means an almost obsessive, all-consuming desire. Something you want so badly that it practically pulls you out of bed in the morning. Hill actually tells the story of Edwin C. Barnes, a man who wanted to work with Thomas Edison. Not just for Edison, with him as a partner. Which, if you think about it, is kind of wild. Barnes didn't have money. He didn't have connections. He didn't even have experience. All he had was this absolute, unwavering determination. So what did he do? He literally showed up at Edison's office one day and declared he was there to be his business partner. And of course, Edison didn't make him a partner on the spot, but he gave him a chance, a job starting at the bottom. Most people would have been discouraged, but Barnes stayed. He worked, he learned. And because his desire was so strong, so clear, he eventually did become Edison's partner in one of his most successful ventures. Now here's where I want you to pause and think for a moment. What's your Barnes-level desire? That thing you want so badly that you'd show up for it, even if you had nothing going for you yet. Because Hill's point here is that success doesn't start with money, or connections, or even skills. It starts with desire. A definite, burning desire. And this is where I think a lot of us get tripped up. We have vague desires, like I want to be successful, or I want to be happy. But what does that even mean? It's like trying to get on a train without knowing the destination. You'll end up anywhere. Hill says you need to be definite. You need to know not just that you want success, but exactly what form it should take. How much money? What kind of business? What kind of lifestyle? It reminds me of this quote: a goal without a plan is just a wish. And that's basically what Hill is saying. Wishing won't cut it. You've got to transform that wish into a burning desire, something you're willing to stake your energy, your time, and your persistence on. So let's make this more real. Imagine two people. One says, yeah, I'd like to write a book someday. The other says, I will write a 250-page novel about a detective in New York by the end of next year, and I'll write 500 words every single morning before work until it's done. Which one do you think is more likely to succeed? Exactly, the one with the definite desire. And Hill gives us a little 6-step formula for this. It's kind of like an exercise. First, decide exactly what you want, like down to the number if it's money, or the details if it's a project. Second, determine what you're willing to give in return. Because nothing comes for free, you have to be willing to put in effort, time, maybe even sacrifice something else. Third, set a definite date when you want to achieve it. Fourth, create a plan and begin at once, whether you feel ready or not. Fifth, write all of this down in a clear, concise statement. And sixth, this is the kicker: read it out loud twice a day. Once in the morning, once at night. Now, I know that last step might sound a little cheesy, like, really? Read it out loud? But think about it. How many times do we talk ourselves out of things, even unconsciously? We say we want something, but our inner voice whispers, you'll never do it. Reading your goal out loud every day is a way of retraining your mind. You're impressing that desire onto your subconscious, and over time, it starts to shape your actions. Let me give you a modern example. Have you ever noticed how athletes visualize before a big game? They literally picture themselves making the shot or running the play over and over. Why? Because when the mind rehearses something enough, the body follows. That's the power of focused desire. It creates a blueprint your actions can follow. Okay, so that's the first major idea: desire. But Hill doesn't stop there, because desire without belief is like a car without fuel. You might know where you want to go, but you won't have the power to get there. And that's where the second big principle comes in: faith. And here's the thing about faith: it's not necessarily about religion, though it can be if that's meaningful to you. In Hill's philosophy, faith is more about belief. It's about convincing yourself deep down that your desire is possible, that it's already yours in some sense, and that nothing can shake that belief. He says faith is developed by something he calls autosuggestion, which basically means the things we repeatedly tell ourselves. Remember that step about reading your goal statement out loud every day? That's not just about desire. It's also about building faith. Because when you say something often enough, with enough conviction, your subconscious starts to accept it as truth. It's kind of like affirmations. I know, affirmations can sound a little woo-woo, but there's actually psychological backing for them. Studies have shown that repeating positive statements about yourself can literally change how your brain responds under stress. It rewires the way you perceive your own abilities. Think about it this way. If you constantly tell yourself, I'm terrible with money, or I'll never get that promotion, your brain starts to look for evidence to support that belief. But if you train yourself to say, I am capable of creating wealth, or I am growing into the kind of person who deserves that promotion, over time, your brain starts to look for evidence of that instead. And honestly, this is where I think Think and Grow Rich gets really exciting. Because it's not just about external stuff, like how do I get a raise or how do I start a business? It's about the inner game. It's about how you talk to yourself, how you think, how you believe. And those inner patterns, they shape everything else. Let's circle back to my friend Daniel with the coffee shop dream. Imagine if, instead of saying, I don't know if I'm ready, he woke up every day and told himself, I am building my coffee shop. I am creating a space for people to connect. I have what it takes to make this happen. Do you think that would change how he acted? I'd bet on it. So just to recap where we are so far, we've talked about desire, that burning, definite desire that sets the foundation. And we've talked about faith, the belief that keeps you moving forward, even when obstacles pop up. Together, those two ideas are like the spark and the fuel. They light the fire and keep it burning. But of course, there's more to Hill's philosophy than just those two pieces. And in our next part, we're going to dig into the next set of principles, the ones that build on desire and faith and take them into practical, everyday action. Because remember, dreaming is beautiful, but doing is where the magic really happens. Now, once you've got that spark of desire and the faith to back it up, the next natural step is, well, how do you actually feed those things into your mind in a way that sticks? Because here's the truth. We're constantly being shaped by what we let into our heads. The news we scroll through, the conversations we have, even the quiet thoughts running on loop when we're brushing our teeth. All of it is programming us, whether we realize it or not. And Napoleon Hill knew this. That's why the next big principle he talks about is what he calls autosuggestion. And don't worry, it's not some complicated, mystical thing. It's basically just the art of teaching your own mind what to believe by what you repeatedly tell it. So imagine this for a second. Picture your mind as a garden. Every thought you have is like a seed. Some are weeds, like doubt, fear, procrastination. Some are flowers, like confidence, ambition, gratitude. Now, here's the kicker. Your subconscious doesn't really care what you plant. It'll grow whatever you feed it the most. If you keep dropping in seeds of negativity, you'll get a garden full of weeds. But if you consistently, intentionally plant the seeds of your desire over and over, your subconscious will eventually start to treat those as reality. Hill says this is the missing piece for most people. Because lots of us set goals, right? We write them down, we get inspired, but then we let old habits of thought take over. That little voice sneaks back in. Who are you to do this? Or, that's too hard. Or, you're not smart enough. Autosuggestion is about flipping that script. It's about deliberately feeding your mind a new story until it becomes second nature. Now, let me share something kind of funny, but very real. I had this friend, Mia, who used to be terrified of public speaking. Like, full-on shaky hands, dry mouth, staring at her notes, wishing she could disappear, kind of terrified. But she really wanted to move up in her career, and she knew that meant she had to start giving presentations. So she tried something simple. Every morning before work, she'd stand in front of her bathroom mirror, look herself straight in the eyes, and say out loud, "I am confident, I speak with clarity, and people love hearing what I have to say." At first, she admitted it felt ridiculous. She even laughed at herself. But she kept at it, every day, and slowly, something shifted. The first time she had to give a presentation after that, was she suddenly perfect? No. But she didn't freeze. She remembered her words. Her voice came out stronger. And most importantly, she walked away thinking, hey, maybe I can do this. And with each repetition, both in her affirmations and in real life, that belief grew stronger. Now, a few years later, she's the person who volunteers to speak at conferences. And it all started with planting those little seeds in her mind through repetition. That's autosuggestion in action. It's not magic. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about choosing which seeds you want to water until they grow strong enough to shape your reality. And Hill is very specific here. He doesn't just say, think positive. He gives a method. Remember that statement of desire we talked about earlier, the one where you write down exactly what you want, plot what you'll give in return, and by when. Autosuggestion is about taking that statement and repeating it daily, out loud, with emotion. Not just mumbling it like you're reading a grocery list, but really feeling it, letting it sink into your imagination. Think of it like charging a battery. The more emotion you attach to the words, the more power they hold. It's the difference between saying, yeah, I guess I want success, versus I am building a life of freedom and purpose, and every single day I'm moving closer to it. One is lukewarm, the other is on fire, and your subconscious responds to that fire. Here's a little analogy I like to use. Have you ever had a song stuck in your head? You hear it on the radio once, and then all day, without even trying, you're humming it. That's kind of how autosuggestion works. By repeating your desire in a strong emotional way, you get it stuck in your head, on loop. And when it's on loop, it starts influencing your actions without you even realizing. you start making little choices that line up with that belief, almost automatically. Now, I know some people might be thinking, okay, but isn't this just wishful thinking? And that's a fair question. But here's the distinction. Autosuggestion isn't about sitting on your couch and chanting, I'm rich, until money rains from the sky. It's about programming your mind so that when opportunities come up, you actually recognize them and you actually have the confidence to act. Because let's be honest, opportunities are everywhere. But if you're in a headspace of doubt, you'll either miss them or talk yourself out of them. There's this quote by Henry Ford that Hill loves to reference: whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And that's exactly the point. Your belief system becomes the lens through which you see the world. Autosuggestion is simply a tool to make sure that lens is working in your favor, not against you. All right, so let's bring this closer to home. If you wanted to try this yourself, here's how you could do it. Let's say your goal is to save $20,000 to start a business within the next 2 years. You'd write down a statement like, I will have $20,000 by December 31st, 2026. I will achieve this by setting aside $500 each month and by creating a side income stream through freelance design. In return, I will dedicate 10 hours a week to my craft, and I will succeed because I am disciplined and creative. Then, every morning and every night, you'd read that out loud. You'd visualize yourself with that money saved. You'd feel the excitement of launching your business. And over time, your mind would start to accept that as fact, and it would drive you to act in ways that make it real. That's the beauty of autosuggestion. It's like you're the author of your own inner script, and the more you rehearse it, the more it becomes the performance of your life. Now, let me tell you something interesting. While Hill talks a lot about autosuggestion, he also makes it clear that it doesn't work in isolation. It needs desire, it needs faith, and it also needs knowledge, which leads us naturally into the next principle he covers: specialized knowledge. And this one, oh my gosh, is such a game changer. Because here's the deal. Knowledge by itself is not power. I know that might sound controversial since we've all grown up hearing that knowledge is power, but Hill flips that on its head. He says it's not just any knowledge that creates power, it's the right kind of knowledge. It's knowledge that's specialized, organized, and directed toward a specific goal. Think about it. If knowledge alone was power, then every librarian would be a millionaire, right? But that's not how it works. What matters is how you use knowledge, and whether it's the kind that actually moves you toward your desire. So, let me give you an example. Imagine two people again. One spends all their time consuming random trivia, facts about space, the history of spoons, celebrity birthdays. Interesting, sure. But does it help them reach their goal of starting a business? Probably not. The other person? They spend their time learning specifically about marketing strategies, customer psychology, managing cash flow, all directly related to running a business. Who's going to be more effective? Obviously the second person, and that's Hill's point. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know the right things. The things that apply directly to what you're trying to achieve. This reminds me of a guy I once met at a networking event. Let's call him Raj. He had this dream of creating an app to help people track their fitness goals. At first, he thought he had to learn everything: coding, design, business strategy, fundraising, you name it. And he got so overwhelmed that he almost gave up. But then he realized he didn't have to know it all himself. He needed to focus on his strength, which was understanding fitness and user behavior. For the rest, he started seeking out people who had the knowledge he lacked. He hired a freelance developer. He partnered with a designer. He consulted with a business mentor. And slowly, the app came together. That's the deeper layer of this principle. Specialized knowledge isn't just about what you personally know. It's also about surrounding yourself with people who have the knowledge you don't. Hill even says, some of the most successful people in history weren't the smartest in the room. They were the ones who knew how to organize and direct knowledge, whether it came from themselves or from others. And in today's world, that's more relevant than ever. We live in the age of Google, YouTube tutorials, online courses. Information is everywhere. The real question is, what do you do with it? Do you scroll endlessly? Or do you zero in on the knowledge that directly feeds your burning desire? One practical way to think about this is to treat your mind like a toolbox. Every piece of specialized knowledge is like a tool you add in. The more relevant tools you have for your specific project, the easier it becomes to build. But if your toolbox is full of random stuff you'll never use, well, it's just clutter. So, here's a little challenge you might try. Take a look at your goals, and then make a list of the top 3 areas of knowledge you need to acquire to move closer to them. Not 10, not 20, just 3. Then ask yourself, how can I start learning these right now? Maybe it's reading a specific book. Maybe it's taking a short online course. Maybe it's reaching out to a mentor. But by focusing on those 3 areas, you're already putting yourself ahead of the curve. And honestly, this ties back beautifully to autosuggestion. Because once you've programmed your mind to believe in your desire, specialized knowledge gives you the tools to actually make it real. It's like having both the blueprint and the hammer. You need both to build the house. So, let's take a breath here. We've explored how to train your mind through autosuggestion, and we've dug into the importance of specialized knowledge, using not just any information, but the right kind, and knowing when to seek out help from others. Both of these principles build on the foundation of desire and faith, and together, they start to shape not just what you believe, but what you do. And that's where things really start to get exciting. Because in the next part, we're going to dive into the principle that ties all these threads together, the one that shows you how to turn knowledge and belief into concrete action. And trust me, this is where the philosophy of achievement starts to feel less like theory and more like a real, step-by-step path you can walk. Now here's where things start to really take shape, because all the desire, all the faith, all the self-talk, and even the specialized knowledge, it all still needs one thing before it turns into reality. And that's imagination. Napoleon Hill actually calls imagination the workshop of the mind. And I love that phrase because it paints this picture of a place where materials, your thoughts, your knowledge, your desires get hammered out into something you can actually use. Like you walk into this workshop with a pile of lumber and you walk out with a table. That's what imagination does for your ideas. And here's the thing. We often underestimate imagination. We tend to think of it as something for kids or for artists or maybe for those rare creative people who dream up billion-dollar inventions. But Hill is saying no. Imagination is a tool for everyone. It's the bridge between the invisible, your desire, and the visible, the actual plan, the action, the outcome. Now, he talks about 2 kinds of imagination. The first is what he calls synthetic imagination. That's when you take old concepts, old ideas, existing knowledge, and rearrange them into something new. It's not necessarily inventing something the world has never seen. It's connecting the dots in a way that creates value. Think about it. Most businesses today aren't built on completely new ideas. They're built on remixing existing ones. Like, take the smartphone. It wasn't invented out of thin air. It's basically a mashup of the telephone, the computer, the camera, the music player. Synthetic imagination brought those existing pieces together into one sleek little device that changed how we live. Then there's creative imagination. That's the deeper, more intuitive side. It's those flashes of insight, those moments of inspiration that seem to come out of nowhere when you're in the shower, or taking a walk, or waking up from a dream. It's when your mind taps into something beyond logic, beyond the 5 senses. Hill even suggests it's a way of connecting with what he calls infinite intelligence, a kind of higher source of ideas. And here's where this gets fun. Because if you think back on your own life, I bet you've had moments like that. Times when an idea just popped into your head, fully formed, and you thought, whoa, where did that come from? Maybe it was a solution to a problem you'd been wrestling with, or maybe it was an idea for a project, or even just the perfect words for an email you were stressing over. That's your creative imagination at work. So how does this tie back to success? Hill says that every great fortune, every major achievement, started in someone's imagination first. Edison imagined the light bulb before it existed. Henry Ford imagined an affordable car when everyone else thought automobiles were only for the rich. The Wright brothers imagined flying long before science said it was possible. Without imagination, desire has nowhere to go. But here's the kicker. Imagination isn't just something you're born with or not. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And the way to use it is to deliberately give your mind problems to solve, desires to shape, goals to visualize. Let me tell you a quick story. A few years ago, I met a woman named Clara who wanted to start a bakery. She loved baking, cakes, pastries, breads, the whole thing. But she kept telling herself, well, there are already so many bakeries in town. How would mine be different? That's where her imagination came in. Instead of giving up, she started playing with ideas. She thought about how people were getting more health conscious. She thought about how parents wanted treats for their kids that weren't loaded with sugar and preservatives. And she thought, what if I created a bakery that specialized in wholesome, organic desserts? Something indulgent, but also nourishing? That spark of imagination gave her the blueprint for her business. She didn't invent baking. She didn't invent bread. But she used synthetic imagination to combine her love of baking with the rising demand for healthier food. Today, her bakery is thriving because she allowed her imagination to take her desire and turn it into something specific and practical. And here's where creative imagination plays a role too. Clara told me there were nights when she'd wake up at 3 a.m. with a new recipe idea, like it had just dropped into her mind from nowhere. That's creative imagination. It shows up when you're deeply engaged with your desire, when your subconscious and conscious mind are both tuned to the same channel. So the lesson here? Don't dismiss your imagination as just daydreaming. It's actually one of the most practical tools you have. Use it. Feed it with your desires. Challenge it with questions like, what if? And how else could this work? And give it space, because sometimes the best ideas don't come when you're grinding, but when you're relaxed enough to let them surface. Now, Hill makes a really important point. He says ideas are like opportunities. They need to be acted on while they're hot. How many times have you had an idea, thought, that's brilliant, and then let it slip away? And a year later, you see someone else doing it, and you're like, that could have been me. We've all been there. That's why cultivating imagination also means cultivating decisiveness and follow-through. Okay, let's pause and breathe on that for a moment. Desire lights the fire. Faith keeps it burning. Autosuggestion feeds it to your subconscious. Specialized knowledge gives you tools. And imagination is where all of that turns into actual ideas and plans. But Hill doesn't stop there, because even with imagination, even with brilliant ideas, there's still a missing piece. And that piece is something we don't like to admit we need, but oh boy, do we ever. Organized planning. And I want to talk about this because it's where a lot of people get stuck. They've got the dream, they've got the excitement, maybe even the ideas, but when it comes to actually organizing those ideas into a step-by-step plan, they freeze. Or they wing it and then wonder why nothing sticks. Hill says flat out, no individual has ever achieved success without a definite plan. And more importantly, without carrying out that plan persistently. It's not enough to imagine it, you've got to build a roadmap. Now let me share something from my own experience. A while ago, I had this idea to start a side project, kind of a book club community where people could connect over the books we talk about here. I was so excited. I had a vision of lively discussions, maybe even live events down the line. But at first, I kept it all in my head. I thought, yeah, I'll just figure it out as I go. And guess what happened? Nothing. Weeks passed, then months. I'd talk about it, but I never made progress. It wasn't until I sat down and actually wrote out a plan, like step 1, create a simple online group. Step 2, post a weekly discussion prompt. Step 3, invite 10 friends to join, that things finally started moving. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was organized, and because it was organized, I could act. That's what Hill is getting at. Planning doesn't mean you have to see the whole staircase. It just means you need the first few steps mapped out clearly, so you can start walking. And here's another piece Hill emphasizes. Don't plan in isolation. Remember when we talked about specialized knowledge? Same idea here. Bring in people who can help you. Create what he calls a mastermind group, a small circle of people you can trust to give input, feedback, and support. Edison didn't invent the light bulb alone. He had a team. Ford didn't build cars alone. He had engineers, marketers, financiers. Success loves collaboration. So if you're building your plan, think, who can I bring in? Who has experience I don't? Who can keep me accountable? Because sometimes the difference between an idea that fizzles and an idea that flies is simply having a team that believes in it with you. Let me give you a modern example. Think about startups today. The most successful ones aren't usually one lone genius. They're co-founders with complementary skills. One's the visionary, one's the tech brain, one's the marketing pro. Together, they turn imagination into organized, actionable steps. And look, planning doesn't mean your plan won't change. It will. In fact, Hill says expect that. Your first plan will probably fail. And that's okay. Failure doesn't mean your desire was wrong. It just means your plan needs adjusting. The key is to keep planning, keep refining, keep acting. Because a weak plan executed is always better than a perfect plan that never leaves your head. I like to think of planning like a GPS. When you're driving somewhere, you don't just say, okay, car, take me somewhere cool. No, you put in a destination. The GPS gives you a route. And sometimes you miss a turn or hit traffic and the GPS recalculates. But you still get there because you had a plan in the first place. That's the power of organized planning. It turns imagination into something you can actually follow. It gives your desire a backbone, and it keeps you moving forward, even when you hit bumps along the way. So if you're sitting on an idea right now, maybe pause after this episode and sketch out a plan. Doesn't have to be fancy, just the first 3 steps. Because once you've got a plan, you've got momentum. And that momentum, that's what we're going to explore even more as we move forward. Because as Hill reminds us, even the best plans need something else to succeed. They need persistence. That quiet, stubborn refusal to give up, even when the first attempt doesn't work. And persistence. That's a principle we'll dig into next because it's the glue that holds all the others together. You know, sitting with all of this, I keep thinking about how each of these ideas kind of builds on the next, like stepping stones across a river. At first, it feels like this big, rushing current. You want success, you want change, but it's all overwhelming, right? And then Napoleon Hill is kind of like, okay, take this first step, desire. Take the next, faith. Then autosuggestion, specialized knowledge, imagination, planning, persistence. One by one, the stones appear, and before you know it, you're halfway across that river you once thought you couldn't cross. And what really strikes me, especially after spending so much time inside this book, is how much of it is about the inner game. Yes, Hill talks about money and achievement and wealth, but really, what he's doing is teaching us how to train the mind. Because the mind, that quiet little voice in our heads, is where the real battle is fought. If you can win there, if you can convince yourself of your own possibility, your own power, then the rest starts to unfold in ways you couldn't have predicted. I'll be honest, when I first read Think and Grow Rich, I expected it to be more like, here are the 10 business tricks to make money fast. You know, kind of like the early version of a hustle guide. But it's not that at all. It's deeper. It's psychological. It's about habits of thought. And honestly, that's why it's still relevant nearly a century later. Business has changed, technology has changed, but the way our thoughts shape our reality, that hasn't changed one bit. And it makes me wonder, how often do we underestimate that? How often do we think the answer lies outside, more money, more tools, more opportunities, when really, so much of it lies inside, in whether we believe, in whether we persist, in whether we dare to imagine something bigger for ourselves. I think about people I've known who've had huge talent, like you'd look at them and think, wow, they could go so far. But they never did, because they didn't believe in themselves. And then I've seen people who honestly weren't the most skilled or the most brilliant, but they had that stubborn, burning desire, and they just kept going, and doors opened for them. And it's like Hill is whispering, see, that's the difference. It's not always the smartest who win. It's the ones who refuse to quit. And I'll share a personal little reflection here. There was a time in my own life when I was really second guessing everything. My career path, my choices, even whether I was capable of chasing the kind of life I actually wanted. And I stumbled back into this book, just sort of flipping through it. And one line caught me. It was about persistence, about how most people quit right before the breakthrough. And I remember thinking, what if I'm standing right in front of the breakthrough and I just don't know it yet? That thought alone kept me going through a really rough patch. And honestly, looking back, I think I was closer than I realized. Because not long after that, things started to shift. That's the gift of a book like this. It doesn't hand you guarantees, it doesn't promise a shortcut, but it gives you a philosophy, a way of approaching your own life with more courage, more clarity, more fire. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway, that success, whatever success means for you, isn't just about money or fame. It's about aligning your mind, your beliefs, your imagination, your knowledge, your persistence, all of it, towards something definite, something that matters to you. So I want to leave you with a couple of questions to think about, and maybe you can just let them simmer in the back of your mind after this episode ends. What is it that you really want? Not the vague, polite answer you'd give at a party, but the deep, burning desire that you might not even say out loud because it feels too big or too impossible. What is that thing? And second, what would it look like if you started treating that desire as real? If you gave it the same respect you give your daily responsibilities? If you fed it with faith, with imagination, with planning? What would that look like in your life 6 months from now? A year from now? 5 years from now? Because here's the beautiful part. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to see the entire path. You just need to take the first step, and then the next, and then the next. And if Hill has taught us anything, it's that with persistence, those steps will carry you farther than you ever thought possible. And maybe, just maybe, one day, you'll look back and realize that the person who doubted, the person who hesitated, that person is unrecognizable compared to the one who kept going, the one who dared to believe, the one who dared to imagine. I love that thought, that who we are today doesn't have to be the limit of who we become, that there's always another level waiting for us to claim it, if we want it badly enough. And you know what? Maybe that's the real richness in Think and Grow Rich. Not just the money, not just the achievements, but the richness of becoming the kind of person who lives fully, boldly, with purpose. So if you're listening to this right now, I just want to say you've already done something powerful. You've given your mind new food, new seeds, and who knows what those seeds will grow into in your life. But trust that if you nurture them, they'll take root. They'll surprise you. They'll lead you somewhere worthwhile. And that, to me, is the magic of books like this. They don't end when you turn the last page. They keep echoing, shaping how you see yourself and the choices you make. All right, my friends, that's where I'm going to leave you today. Thank you for sharing this journey through Think and Grow Rich with me. It's been such a joy to talk it through, to reflect on these principles, and to think about how they still touch our lives today. If this conversation stirred something in you, if it gave you even one idea, one spark of encouragement, then it's already worth it. Because you never know. That one spark could be the thing that changes everything for you. So, take care of yourselves. Keep imagining, keep believing, and most of all, keep moving forward. And with that, I just want to say, thank you so much for listening to Lit Talk with Lisa. Until next time, goodbye for now.